Welcome to the studio above the clouds with Serendipity Sellers. I am Dr. Hannah Tony, and we'll get started with this session here just momentarily. We'll give folks just a moment. I'm a little early. We've talked about this before, and my earliness. It's a problem. It's a problem. Let me get you focused in a bit better here, both of us, the table and me. Well, let's see if we can do both here a little bit better. There we go. You don't really need to see me, right? Maybe a little bit, little bit. All right. I show that we are the top of the hour, which is noon in these parts. Wherever you're joining from, it may be different, but welcome to this studio session, what it means to make something. And we're going to talk about the space between thinking and making, because there is a difference between thinking about making something and doing it. So, welcome in today. And if you're joining live, please feel free to say hello in the chat and let me know where you're pulling up a chair from today. And I'm glad everybody's here. So today's studio session again is about something really deceptively simple, the space between thinking about making something and actually beginning, because most creative work does not die from lack of talent. It dies in hesitation, overthinking, in perfectionism, in exhaustion, and in waiting for the right conditions. And honestly, I think many people spend years circling work they deeply want to make, not because you are lazy and not because you are incapable, but because beginning is really psychologically vulnerable. So let's start with the fantasy of readiness, because I think one of the biggest myths around creativity is the idea that people get started when they feel ready. Most people do not. Readiness is often something that we think is going to show up after we learn more, or we get more certain or more comfortable in our lives, after we get more confidence, after more time, or after our life just calms down. But creativity and creative work rarely really begins from certainty. It's usually from curiosity, discomfort, longing. It begins from the quiet realization that there's something inside of you, or not quiet, that keeps insisting that it has to exist. But thinking about making something can feel really satisfying because the thinking has no risk. Thinking allows the fantasy of perfection to remain intact, because an unwritten book isn't going to fail. An unpainted painting is not going to disappoint you. An unwritten idea, an unplanned business is not going to disappoint you. But beginning changes all of that. But I also, all right, before we get into this, I want to recognize something here, because I think conversations around creativity can accidentally get really disconnected from material reality. Because sometimes people are like genuinely exhausted, not metaphorically, but actually exhausted. You are working multiple jobs, you are raising children, you are managing caregiving, you are trying to survive economically. You are living inside systems that leave very little unclaimed energy. And all of that matters. I am very, very aware that part of why I have time and space to build creatively right now is because someone I loved very much died and left me money. And that is the truth. And I think pretending otherwise would create a false narrative about creativity that I do not believe. Because the reality is that many people are not failing to create because they lack passion. They lack margin, time margin, financial margin, emotional margin, cognitive margin, and all of those things profoundly affect creative capacity. So, this is not a conversation about if you are not creative, you are just not trying hard enough. And dog, that is not what we are talking about here today. Sometimes survival itself is already consuming enormous amounts of your energy. But, and this is the big but that I want you to stop for. I like big butts and anyway, sorry. I think there's another truth that lives inside that one. Even in super constrained lives, human beings still reach towards making and creating tiny acts of creation, tiny acts of imagination, tiny acts of selfhood. We write a paragraph, we make a sketch, we grow a garden, a plant, we write a song or a verse, we tell a story at the dinner table, we make dinner. And those creative practices are not they're not an escape from difficulty, but they are a resistance from disappearing inside of it. So let's get back to why we avoid beginning. But I wanted to acknowledge that. I just think that that's super important because I do think that we tend to avoid beginning because creativity is misunderstood and the avoidance is misunderstood. We think it's about lack of discipline or seriousness or commitment, but a lot of times it's about protection because making something introduces judgment. It introduces uncertainty and visibility, and it introduces imperfection. And our nervous systems are wired to notice all of that. And creative work asks us to be observable, and that is vulnerable, especially for people who were rewarded consistently for competence, professionalism, correctness, and certainty. Creative work very rarely offers those things immediately. It's going to offer confusion first. It's going to offer bad drafts, awkward attempts, unfinished fragments, weird looking attempts. And adults are, by and large, deeply uncomfortable at being beginners again. In fact, we are taught quite young to avoid those feelings as people in the public school system. So let's talk a little about what I call the performance trap, because one of the things I think social media has complicated even further is that people now feel pressure, even more pressure, to perform creativity instead of practice it. Because practice is weird, man. Practice is repetitive, it's messy, it's private, it's inconsistent, you get bad pages. You don't want to know how much got pulled out of the Storykeeper's Daughter book. Holy cow. You get failed sketches. You get abandoned ideas. You get the whole learning curve You get half finished experiments. Art is science. You get experimentation. But when you get online, all you're going to see are the beautiful outcomes. You see the finished paintings, the published books, the perfectly edited and put together studios, the completed identities. And I think that that creates the illusion that creativity arrives fully bloomed and formed. And baby, it does not. Creative work is usually built through accumulated imperfect sessions, not grand, beautiful inspiration. It's a lot of messy middle. So I think people are not blocked creatively. Wow, my mouth today. They are blocked because they're blocked relationally. They've learned to associate essentially visibility with judgment and judgment with something bad. So people stay in this prep mode forever and ever, you know? So they avoid being judged. So let's talk. And I want to offer a couple of prompts to you. So prompt 1. What is something that you've been circling creatively? A story, a painting, a business, a class, a conversation you should have, a change you'd like to make. So if you've got something to write down on, just something that you have been circling creatively, just take a moment to write that down. That's good. All right, you got that? Something creative. And creative can mean a lot of things. You heard me say, I mean, it could be a business idea, it could be a change to your life. It doesn't have to be a picture that you're going to paint, it doesn't have to be a book you're going to write. Creative can mean a lot of things. It can be a class that you want to take. But what's something creative that maybe just say different, honestly? What's something you've been circling for a while that you just are kind of avoiding because 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 it's not what you do, because you don't have time for it, because it's a risk? All right, make sure you got that. I'm going to give you prompt 2. What do you believe would happen if you actually got started? And not the optimistic answer, and not the super negative answer, but like an honest answer, like an honest to goodness answer. Like what do you think would happen if you got started? Not the gloom and doom, and not the I'm gonna be a New York Times bestseller, because that's unlikely too. Not impossible, but unlikely. I know. um, but what do you think would happen? Just a realistic. What do you think would happen if you were to get started right now? You'd run out of time, run out of energy, run out of resources. Maybe it would go really well. It would just be, I mean, just years and years, and that's legit. But what do you think would happen? Got a hair in there. Oh well. There we go. I got it. Ha. Take another moment or so. Just an honest answer. Not optimistic, not gloom and doom, but what do you think would actually happen? All right. Now, third prompt. This is the last one, and then we'll go back into it. But I want to give you one more prompt here. But this is the big one. What would small enough to start look like? Not, I'm finished. This is it. This is the final. Not a Broadway show, but like the entryway version, the doorway version, the one sketch, the 10-minute version, one imperfect attempt. What would that look like? What would happen if you did that? Mhm. So just take a moment. What do you think that would look like? Again, not the finished version, not the, oh my gosh, here's the final show, the book, but I sat down and worked on it for 10 minutes. What would that look like? I think this thing is losing hair. And what do you have to lose? Not trying to get it perfect, not investing $500,000. Ugh, I shuddered, threw up in my mouth a little. It's a lot of money. But a little bit of your time, little bit of your energy. Just take another moment. What would that look like? What stands in your way from doing that? The imperfect, messy, short, experiment. I ask you that because sometimes the thing that changes creative momentum is not actually oftentimes the thing that changes creative momentum is not motivation at all. It's reducing the psychological distance between you and actually getting started. Just do something. All right, so let's reframe creative practice a little bit because I also think that this is a big shift that we can make. Because creativity is not a performance, It is a relationship. And relationships are built through return, not perfection. You return to a page, to a studio, to an instrument, to an idea, to a practice again and again and again and again and again. And it's not always going to be brilliant and it's not always going to be beautiful. In fact, oftentimes it is and anyone who tells you otherwise is probably trying to sell you something. But you keep up the practice and build the relationship. And over time, something shifts. Creative practice stops feeling like proving yourself and it starts to feel like listening to yourself instead. And that's a very different experience. And I think a lot of people are waiting for creativity to feel fearless before they get started, but most creativity is not built from fearlessness. It's built from permission. You just give yourself permission to be bad, permission to learn in public, permission to make things before you really understand what you're making, permission to become through practice instead of before it. And I think that's my invitation for you all today. Not like become a different person, but just begin before you feel ready, because the creative life you want to build may not be waiting on talent. It is not waiting on talent, it's waiting on practice. So thank you for spending part of your lunch with me today, or part of your time, whatever time you have spent. If these conversations resonate and you would like to keep pulling up a chair at the big table above the clouds, please subscribe to the channel. I host these sessions once a month. And if there's something that you've been circling creatively, I don't know, maybe this week, stop just thinking about it and get started. Just do it. I'll see you next time. And I'm going to keep working on this painting. And I think I'm going to just keep letting the live stream roll while I do. So you all can just you can log out now because this is actually the end of me talking. But I'm going to keep working on this. And if you would like to keep hanging out and watching, you are quite welcome to, and kind of see where this goes. I'm not entirely sure yet. Actually, I do obviously have an idea of what I'm doing. But if you'd like to chill, please feel free to. But I would love to hear also about anything that you all got into over time. And I will look forward to seeing you all next time. See ya from the studio above the clouds. Whoops. Separated into what I'm going to use them for. Excuse me. It's getting quite warm. Oops. Wait, if somebody joins us later, you're going to be confused. What is she doing? Show's over. This is ridiculously boring. This is the hard part. particularly for people who have a bit of the ADHD, like me. It's ridiculously boring. Doing the same thing over and over again. Mm-mm. 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 Not fun. It's where some of the executive dysfunction comes in and I start to shut down. Sorry. I can already feel myself wanting to misbehave. What can I get into? Anything but this. This is where you ruin a piece of artwork because you're just so bored. You're just like, it happens. Or you're so fed up with it, you just stop because you're bored. If this is really what I have to do to finish this, holy crap. I really do feel my brain like it's revolting. It is revolting. You're revolting. No. Cheese and rice. Of all the pictures for me to have decided, oh, let me do some koi fish with some rocks. That's a good idea. I mean, I couldn't possibly finish in the time allotted. I'm gonna stab these koi. I don't kind of do. Kind of do. Ugh. Seriously. This is the true discipline. Freaking koi. Freaking rocks. Freaking rocks. And there need to be so many more. So freaking many more. All right, I gotta take a break from the rocks. Actually, I gotta stand. I don't do anything sitting down. Except apparently at these events. But I do not sit. Because I don't sit. Ew. Yuck. Not that one. This one. Ow. Is that? Huh. There go the splinter or something. Oops. All right, I'm gonna let the green dry. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna let this green stuff dry, and then lily pads, green stuff, technical terms, and then come back and check it out later. But for now, this is where we are. If you stuck around, thank you. So that's super cool. If you didn't, I get it. But this is where we went, and it's by no means finished. And it's, I wouldn't even say like necessarily beautiful, but it's working on it, and it is practice, as we discussed. Because rather than go for protection, what? What? Tell I've been staring down at a picture for too long. Rather than go for perfection, rather than protect yourself by not starting because you are going for perfection, you might as well just get started and practice and get something. And I'll put this aside and let it dry. And then I'll come back to it. I'm not going to pick it up so you can see it better because this down here is super wet and it will run and I'll mess it up. And we're not going to do that because that would be sad. So I'm not going to get overzealous and do that, but it will become the cover for this recording when it's finished. And I'll be back. So thanks for hanging out if you did, and I'll see you next time at the studio above the clouds. Have a great one.